Welcome back to the channel, everybody. As the dog walks around in the backfield, we are right now launching the number 6 video in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive series, the Green Bay Packers. This has all happened before any semblance of any type of Romeo Doubs trade, or more importantly than that, a Micah Parsons acquisition, which Green Bay is arguably the front runner to be able to do that. Now, what a Micah Parsons trade would do to this ranking, it would elevate it tremendously. Their defense would go way up. Their overall grade would probably go somewhere into the top 3. But we can't really anticipate that. These videos got to come out. The season's almost starting. The dog is not impressed that Micah Parsons is yet to be traded. But Green Bay has to execute with what they have. And what they have is a relatively balanced offense with a really good offensive line, a quarterback with a lot of expectations around him. I would say a head coach with a lot of pressure to make this quarterback work, and that's Jordan Love. The weapons are a nice little mishmash variety group. You know, lots of speed out there with Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden. Romeo Doubs adds some size out there. Be interesting to see what they do with Doubs as the regular season sort of starts to come to fruition here. But from a defensive perspective, you know, you got Jeff Hafley, you got Aaron Cooper, who is a great developmental piece at linebacker. They lost Jair Alexander permanently. Some Packers fans would argue that he was never there to begin with, but they have Xavier McKinney on the back end. How that secondary continues to develop and how now everyone sort of fits in terms of a starting role, you know, with the addition of Nate Hobbs, who's he an outside corner? Is he a slot guy? Carrington Valentine's going to get some more playing time now. Where's Javon Bullard fit in all this? That's going to be something to watch. But the defensive line is the real issue. Lucas Van Ness, you know, that's why they're talking about getting Micah Parsons. The interior defensive line has a nice little fancy rotation in there. But how this group develops and how these players start to actually see their true self, their true development, their true potential starts with the coaching staff here led by Matt LaFleur. He's my 7th head coach, you know, a 93 grade. He really does hover around that top 5. Now, it's hard to get him into the top 5 because, you know, the playoff success and all that. You're hoping for some championship caliber coaching here, but from just a mind and setting a culture and all that, he's done phenomenal in this role for the entire time he's been there. He's managed a lot of different personalities. That's why it's kind of interesting, the thought of, you know, like I said at the top here, Micah Parsons not traded as of this recording. He's not on Green Bay. What does that look like when a personality like that comes in? Because the talent's undeniable. But how does Matt LaFleur manage that personality? We saw him manage an out-there personality in Aaron Rodgers really well. Aaron Rodgers had his best seasons under Matt LaFleur, back-to-back MVP years, the whole thing. How does he, when he's got that defensive guy, how does he handle the defensive guy? And he hasn't really experienced that in his time here in Green Bay. The only one that's been like this odd personality has really had to manage been Quay Walker, who, from the perspective of his maturity and everything, just really, you know, the walking down the tunnel thing is just what Quay Walker's always sort of stayed with him, and the development and stuff, and him putting a defensive coordinator in place. He's got Jeff Hafley here, who comes in 23rd for me. It's just because the defense just doesn't have that oomph to it, you know, outside of you know, Xavier McKinney, you know, they lost Jair Alexander. That does some damage to their overall coverage ability. They went from being like a really great cover team to now, you know, dropping a fair number of spots. Still good by all means. They got some good bodies in there, but now it's more about how Jeff Hafley's going to put these guys in the right positions to succeed on the back end, because there's not really defined roles now. Like, everyone sort of just got bumped up the depth chart a little bit, so it kind of hurt the depth. It kind of put guys into starting positions that kind of hurt the overall perception of the group. You know, Aaron Cooper developed really well, but the linebacker coach is gone. He's in Jacksonville now. So how do you carry on what you did with Aaron Cooper last year as a rookie? And, you know, Jeff Hafley's biggest concern is, I would say, Lucas Van Ness, if he's still on the team, if he's not part of some trade package to get Micah Parsons, which I wouldn't think that I don't know that he would be. I think Kingsley Nagbari would be more likely to do that, even Rashawn Gary, to maybe lessen the amount of, draft picks that you have to send over, but how does he develop Lucas Van Ness? Former first-round pick, hasn't really caught on yet. You need to get him. You need to get the defensive line coach. You need to get these guys working to get Van Ness going because, yes, Van Ness was drafted a year early, so maybe last year would have been more akin to what his rookie year would have looked like had he stayed in school like many people suggested he do. So this, count this as his sophomore year. He needs to take that other leap, and because Rashawn Gary needs some help on the opposite side of him. And for so many years, this defense was so uninventive. The Joe Barry years, it was so simplistic and almost high schoolish with the way they would run their zone coverages and the way they would design blitzes and strategies from week to week. That Hafley needs to find a way to ignite this defense because the offense is always going to be there. The system is too strong. The strategy is too strong. Even Adam Stenovich, as the offensive coordinator, hovering around that top 10 for me. He's one of these guys that if this offense sees a level of success, and I think it really all banks on really what we see from the weapons room in particular, as well as the development of Jordan Love. But, how they've schemed up all these different types of bodies they have of wide receivers and tight ends and, the running back room and all that. They've done a really great job of that collaboration aspect. So I would look for Adam Stenovich to maybe enter into that head coaching conversation, the rookie head coaching conversation come this offseason. If this Green Bay Packers offense can sustain like a top 7 performance this year, I think that would be pretty fair. Does Matt LaFleur stand a shot of being coach of the year? I would not bet on it because I don't know that they're going to dominate the league the way they would have to for him to get that consideration. I think the league respects Green Bay coming in here. I think they respect the roster. And I think they just expect a lot of Matt LaFleur. And that says a lot of positive things, though, about the overall perception of LaFleur as a head coach. Now, his main objective is to develop Jordan Love. Jordan Love was picked under his watch. He didn't really develop Aaron Rodgers. Despite Rodgers having all those great years, Rodgers was very much a molded piece of clay by the time LaFleur got this job. So that needs to be considered when we talk about who's going to get what job here, who's going to get developed, and is LaFleur really in that top 5? It really all depends on what Jordan Love ends up becoming by the end of this year, because they did extend Jordan Love based on like a third of a season's worth of work when, they extended him like they did. Now you're sort of sitting here going, he's probably, middle of the pack. You got to get him into that top 10 or else, do you consider moving on from that? I think that's the task of LaFleur, and I think if Jordan Love fails, I do wonder if that puts Matt LaFleur's job in jeopardy at all. Because he is a great coach. But we've seen a lot of great coaches fired. We've seen a lot of great coaches dismissed after really great seasons. I mean, Marty Schottenheimer went 14-2 the year that he was fired. Like Lovie Smith and, these guys were not... They didn't necessarily have these teams in terrible positions. They just couldn't get to the next level. They couldn't develop the right things, and the organization moved on. I wonder if Green Bay is maybe perhaps growing a little impatient with Matt LaFleur in the sense of they had a lot of regular season success that hasn't been backed up by playoff success, and it does sort of trend in that direction with everyone sort of under this coaching umbrella. LaFleur, it's Shanahan, it's O'Connell, it's all these guys. So I do wonder if maybe you need to make some sort of adjustment to the system here to make this all sustainable into the playoffs. And it's a tough division for Green Bay to be playing in, but the roster is there for LaFleur to make this work, and they need to make a playoff run, I think, here this year, or else we may be entering next season with Matt LaFleur maybe a little bit more on the hot seat than people might want to admit right now here in the summer of 2025. Summer of 2026, I think it may be a different story if Matt LaFleur doesn't get this team at least a playoff win this season. This is the part of the video where I come in for an ad break, but there's still no ads. So I need likes, I need subscriptions, and I need it from you guys right there. And even if you have that little hype option now, there's a hype option. Click the hype button. Is there a hype button for you? Are you watching on your mobile device? Hit the hype. There's a hype now. Hype me. Hype me. And here's a tremendous task for Matt LaFleur. It's Jordan Love, who for me comes in. He's the 14th ranked quarterback for me coming in. Malik Willis is a good backup. He's proven to be a good backup. I think he does enhance the run game more than anything else. He's one of the better running threat quarterbacks out there, so he can come in, operate some RPOs need be, but Jordan Love very much is the guy. There's no one that's really breathing down his neck at all. I wouldn't say Malik Willis is doing that at all. The thing with Jordan Love is his tenure in Green Bay, once he finally became the starter, that week 1, after Rodgers left to go play for the Jets, it was a rough beginning for him. Very rough. He picked it up later in the year, ended up working out for him, and he looked like he was really on the ascent. What we got last season was much more of something between those two different acts that he had that first year. He wasn't completely terrible, but he was not this top 10, top 7 quarterback in terms of how he was executing play to play, how he was managing the play clock, managing the game clock, anticipation, staying on time. The intermediate plays were brutal. They were not good. He operated well in the short. He threw a decent deep ball, but he wasn't going to the deep ball as much as, we anticipated. Sure, some of that has to do with Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs' health and all that. That's why you get Matthew Golden in the draft. But his adjusted completion percentage was 74.7. So it's not like they were leaving a lot of plays on the field by a mistake of the receivers. When he was blitzed, he didn't do a great job of navigating that, of understanding where his hot reads were and everything. He wasn't doing what we're going to see some of these other quarterbacks that we're going to cover a little bit later in the series, here towards the end, like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, what they did against the blitz. He didn't have that level of anticipation. And then when that blitz got home, he was horrific. So when he's kept clean, he's what you would want him to be. He's not an incompetent quarterback. He's relatively smart with good arm talent, good arm strength. It's just putting it all together and staying. I don't know if it's a confidence thing, but it could be, right? It could be like a confidence thing, but it's not like he has a bad offensive line in front of him. So, does he not trust the receivers? I don't know why that would be the case. I think he's got some good weapons out there. He's got a good tight end. He's got a good running game to help back him up, which is why the play action performance was kind of baffling to me as well. Coming in, gets a B-. When you have Josh Jacobs back there and Emmanuel Wilson was so good as a backup, why was he not like an A-level play action quarterback? And I think that's on him, with some technique issues, with maybe some of the RPOs, being able to pull the ball back properly and, faster and be more on time and more accurate on the throws when operating play action, when you have to move that pocket from east to west or whatever, from sideline to sideline, repositioning that or getting outside the pocket and making that throw downfield on the run. Keeping your eyes downfield properly. The play action, when you turn your back to the defense, pull it back, your eyes have to be sharp, and they just weren't that. It feels like he was so much more worried about getting hit and taking a sack or maybe, strip sacks and all that he kind of lost that killer instinct he had towards the end of that last season. I'm not saying that I am anticipating a collapse here from Jordan Love. I'm just fearful that this is kind of just the quarterback he's going to be. Which, he spent a lot of, he hasn't played a lot of professional football to his defense, but he did spend a lot of time on the mental aspect of the game, which this should not be that big of an issue for him at this stage. You sat behind one of the greatest of all time. There needs to be some sort of, application of what you've learned that didn't apply on a consistent basis. So maybe Matt LaFleur needs to simplify the scheme a little bit. Maybe he needs to simplify the checks pre-snap to get Jordan Love some confidence back. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right decision because this offense operates really well when you're able to make those pre-snap adjustments. So Jordan Love has to just, by my estimation, he needs to get on top of being that pre-snap quarterback. That guy who's able to call out the hot reads, establish them, move the offensive line in the right way, figure out where the blitzes are coming from, properly identify the Mike linebacker. All these pre-snap adjustments he needs to be able to execute on a much more consistent basis if Green Bay is going to be able to progress in the playoffs. Because once you get to those playoffs, even in this division, the strength of the defenses in this division is only getting better. We saw it with Detroit, who we've already covered. Minnesota, we've already covered. Minnesota, tremendously well coached on the defensive side of the ball, where he's going to be facing enormous amounts of pressure playing against that team. And you don't know where exactly it's going to be coming from because they're going to scheme it up in so many different ways. So he needs to be really on top of that pregame preparation. So then that way he can focus his eyes down the field. He doesn't drop the eyes to the offensive line, defensive line, even to the second level. Keeps those eyes 15 yards down the field. Like you're driving a car and you look 3 cars ahead. He's got to get into that mindset and stay in that mindset and be able to trust, his instincts a little bit more to navigate these pockets more consistently and much better than what he was doing last season. And being able to willingly stand in there and take a hit in the pocket and still release the ball, get past that hump as well that he doesn't seem to have truly gotten past as much as it looked like that he did. Sort of regressed a little bit to what we saw. So I don't think he's going to be somebody who's going to go out there and he's going to lose this team a bunch of games. I don't think that at all. I think that his floor for his ability is just too high for him to be that guy. I do worry that his ceiling may not be high enough at this point to be the guy who goes out and wins you games. So this is going to be a very telling season, I think, for Jordan Love. 16 big-time throws to 13 turnover-worthy plays. Perfect example of that. That's a brutally close. To have all that speed that he has on this team in that receiving core, to only have 16 big-time throws, that's a yikes moment for me. Run through this weapons group here. They're 18th for me. Romeo Doubs talked about as a trade candidate. Again, that trade has not happened either. So no movement here on the offensive side as I'm recording this. Christian Watson. Don't know how long he's going to be out for. He's still represented there. He still would come in and be a tremendous asset to this offense as a straight line speed guy. That's the one thing that I noticed about how they built this group. They built it with a lot of speed. Allows them to play really fast. Adding Mecole Hardman on top of that I think was another testament to that. Starts with Jaden Reed, who's their best receiver, but only an 83 grade. So they've really gone with we're going to have a more balanced attack rather than a more focused, like a more focused, true alpha wide receiver. Because Jay Reed operates really well out of the slot. 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had 10 drops, which is pretty damn brutal. That's a brutal amount of drops to have. So that's something that needs to be significantly cleaned up here. He worked the deep really well. You'd like to see him be much better on these little bubble screens and tunnel screens and everything because he does have so much speed and shiftiness. You'd expect him to play a lot better in that area. Even in the intermediate to shorts, run those drag routes out of the slot and everything. You want that quick game to sort of be there a lot better than what it was for Jaden Reed. The drops are horrific. I think that's the number one issue with him that you need to be very concerned about. When I saw that number, I was like, holy crap. Because he's a pretty good physical receiver, too, out of the slot. The contested catches, it's not bad. Not bad at all. But I'm sort of sitting here going, well, can you trust him in big time situations now? You get to the jugs machine there, pal. It needs to happen, but that's another reason why you go out and you get Matthew Golden from Texas, who, had only 2 drops and less than a 5% drop rate. He operates mostly from the outside. About a quarter of his snaps at Texas were taken from the slot. So I anticipate him being this outside receiver, sort of what Christian Watson would be. So I wonder how they're sort of going back and forth with each other in that sense of when Christian Watson does return. Is that why Romeo Doubs is out and they're sort of going to replace Doubs and just go speed everywhere? The yards after the catch, last year for Matthew Golden, it's kind of hard from a statistical standpoint, though, to really look at what he did and judge him off of it. Because it feels like last season for him was a lot more of just a showcase for the NFL and for his draft stock. I mean, it worked. It worked perfectly. He ended up being a first-round pick after being somebody that really wasn't talked about at all. I think while people were saying they were trying to watch Isaiah Bond and everything, they came and saw Golden and went, maybe it's this guy that's the real star of this wide receiver group. He's definitely not in a lot of legal trouble or anything. So from a showcase standpoint, it worked out for him. And so I think, Green Bay sees that and goes, okay, this guy fits in this way. It's always hard to tell what a rookie wide receiver is going to be able to produce, right? Is he going to be Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.? Or is he going to be Roma Dunze and sort of just hover around like that 700-yard mark and not really blow anyone away with anything and make you wonder if maybe he's ever going to be able to adjust to the pro game? There's a double-edged sword with all this stuff. I think Green Bay is going to put the ball in the air enough that he's going to get some opportunities. But I do wonder if he's going to be able to just execute against the team's best corner, because that feels like who he's going to be matched up against most of the time, at least early in the season as well. Get Jane Reed operating out the slot, you're not going to see the team's top corner all that much. Matthew Golden's probably going to be seeing a lot of top corners in the league, so he's going to be in for a rough start, I think, to his career as he adjusts to the physicality of the league, as he adjusts to trying to get that release off the line of scrimmage, the option routes, making sure that he understands when he's hot and when he's not, and et cetera, et cetera. So there could be some learning curves here for Matthew Golden, just based on the fact that, at Texas, did they do a lot of that stuff, and how often was it done? And because, they had Quinn Ewers who had some experience there, so they might have given him something. So that would be something more for Texas fans to address. I'm not completely up to speed with Texas's overall offensive scheme or anything. But they have Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks can make some plays out there from time to time. Christian Watson, like I said, Savion Williams sort of quietly, working his way in there. McCole Hardman, like this high floor, kind of know what you got. High floor, low ceiling wide receiver. Can do a couple of things. Malik Heath is sort of in there. They've got Bo Melton out of there. He's a corner now. Then you get to the tight end. You get Tucker Kraft, who's, starting caliber. He's a good little safety blanket. Josh Jacobs, fantastic in the pass game. He was really great last season. I anticipate him to be able to come in and do a lot of the same. Just not a lot of depth at the tight end position in the receiving game, nor for the running back room. You're getting much more, I would say, much better production out of the running back room as a traditional running back room, more so than in the receiving game. But, man, you get Josh Jacobs out there in space on a screen pass. Watch out. Because, for a guy his size, he's got so much speed, and his hands are pretty damn good. He's able to really navigate through the blocks and, anticipate, where the gaps are going to be on the back end of the defense when he does get out in that space on like a swing pass or something. I think Tucker Kraft does a great job executing in the red zone and, in between the hashes, which will be a majority of what he does. You need that guy like him while you have all this speed out there, like Dontavian Wicks, like Matthew Golden, like Jaden Reed, like Christian Watson when he comes back, McCole Hardman. You have all that speed out there. You need like that meat and potatoes guy that Tucker Kraft can really be. And he's sort of like this sneaky, from week to week, he'll have like really great performances, and then some weeks he'll just disappear. But I think from an overall, he'll be a really solid guy to have there that sort of keeps the linebackers honest and keeps those safeties from fully feeling comfortable retreating. Because if they do, then you can just dump it to Tucker Kraft all game and eat them apart for 7-8 yards and just wait till the safeties drop, and then you got all that speed to go over the top. So that's what Tucker Kraft would be really good at for this roster. But overall, them lacking like that true number one does hurt their group. It does hurt the overall trajectory of what this group could be. Golden seems to be the one right now that's set out to be the one who could be the breakout star. Because you've had Jaden Reed now for a couple of years. You've had Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson for a couple of years. Dontavian Wicks for a couple of years. You kind of know who they are at this point. I feel like their grades that I gave them here are sort of just who those guys are and who they're always going to be. So, who's going to be the one that breaks out? Savion Williams, Matthew Golden. Yeah, banking on being Matthew Golden, the first-round pick. So we'll see how all that works out. But this is the thing they're really going to be able to fall back on, and it's the running back room. It's a top 2, top 3 running back room at worst. You're not going to find running back rooms like this just anywhere, especially from a depth perspective. Like Emmanuel Wilson was a really good depth back just a year ago. So, and Marshawn Lloyd took in at USC, has some injury concerns, but he's, you're hoping that he can settle in and be like this strong backup presence to Josh Jacobs, who really is the star of the show. He ran up nearly 300 carries last year, 1,329 yards, 15 touchdowns, 74 first downs. Just a fantastic back. He did it all, too, out of zone, out of gap. He was using power. He was using speed. We talked about what he was doing as a receiver out of the backfield. If Saquon Barkley didn't do what he did in Philadelphia, we would have been talking probably about Josh Jacobs being like this superstar running back who brought back the idea of the veteran running back and the running game and everything. He would have probably been the one that was getting all the credit for it rather than Saquon Barkley getting all the credit for it. Because for those two guys to switch teams and to see what those two teams' running games became last year compared to what Green Bay and Philadelphia's running games became, I mean, talk about making front offices feel a little ridiculous for letting these guys go. Because Josh Jacobs, unlike Barkley, didn't really show signs of regression with the Raiders. It's sort of just like, we don't want to pay him a lot of money. So he comes over to Green Bay, and he's always seemingly making the right decision, hitting the right hole, making linebackers miss, being so sudden and making these quick cuts and outrunning guys in the secondary, down the field for some big plays. He had 11 runs that were 15-plus yards. Getting those physical, short yardage plays, 74 first downs accounted for, 66 missed tackles forced in totality. He just did it all. He did it all perfectly. As perfect as you can get. And I expect this to be pretty much the trend for him moving forward into this next season, because he's become this top tier running back, really established himself. Now the offensive line is great, and he knows how to use the offensive line to his perfect advantage. And they scheme up the running game so well with the zone running especially, that allows him to have these breakout plays, these giant runs. And you need almost two guys to bring him down at all times. He's such a physical specimen that the thought of having to have one guy take him down, you're sort of stuck now as a defense, because from a defensive perspective now, you pretty much have to worry about stacking the box. You can't have these, even when Green Bay now, when they have these receivers who they're going to be able to spread out so often and have all that speed. Now as a defense, you're sort of sitting there going, okay, we have to account for this somehow. Don't know how we can possibly account for all this, because he's got all this size, he's got all this power behind him. We can't leave a singular linebacker just exposed here. And we can't just bring down a safety because the safety's too small. He's going to run the safety over. It really does become a bit of a nightmare for opposing defenses. And this is why we go back to Jordan Love a little bit to a degree. Jordan Love needs to be able to really take advantage of the fact that this is the kind of back that he's dealing with on this team. A true superstar caliber running back who should make the play action game so much easier for him. And they should probably go to it a lot more than what they did last year. You know, we'll see how often they go to it. But to have Jordan Love and to have Josh Jacobs, and to have this guy who's going to get you 4.5, 5 yards every carry, you need to make sure that he's getting a fair amount of the workload as well, because he is one of those backs who, you know, you need him to wear out the opposing defense. He's this rare talent where he can be the bruising back who can wear them out, but then he simultaneously can be the back that then takes advantage of that and just starts burning them down the field. So to find a way to continuously mix that in without becoming overly predictable, it's a fine line for LaFleur to have here with the second year with Jacobs, because they really used it about as well as you could anticipate last year. And now with, you know, you bring in Aaron Banks, who's got some experience in this offensive scheme to play the guard. You know, you've maybe upgraded the offensive line in the process now. You've moved Elgton Jenkins to center, so maybe you get some better pop off the middle now with Jenkins there as opposed to Josh Myers. So we'll see how that works out for Jacobs. But I think that no matter what, you're looking at a running back who, as long as you consistently get him the ball, he's going to keep this offense going. He's going to make sure that you're ahead of schedule on second and third down because of that. And that's really the key to having a very successful offense in the league, especially when you're playing these teams in the division that have these high-powered offenses. You want to keep those offenses off the field. And there's going to be no shortage of firepower that they're going to be facing, even just within their division. You know, Minnesota, Detroit, even Chicago, who you're anticipating should have a relatively explosive offense as the season at least goes on. You need this kind of guy who can run the clock down, keep games short, you know, punish the opposing team, force the opposing offenses to now be much more predictable. So having a guy like Josh Jacobs just helps out everything on both sides of the ball in so many measurable and intangible ways. And he's doing it behind an offensive line that's right smack dab in the middle in terms of run blocking, but is a top 3 offensive line in pass blocking coming into this season. And I really believe that. That's why, you know, again, I keep going back. This has to be where Jordan Love picks it up here. It has to be. He has to find that place to really trust this group, because this group is so solid. You know, even kicking Elgton Jenkins into guard, this will be the 4th position that Elgton Jenkins has played on this team, has started a season on for this team since coming to the league. You know, he started as a guard on a left guard, then he was a right guard, then he was a right tackle, and now he's starting the season at center. It's a lot for him, and we'll get to him. We'll start with Rasheed Walker, though, the left tackle, who from a pass blocking perspective is relatively solid. He's not the greatest, but he has done enough where he established himself as a starting caliber tackle with this type of performance. And, you know, 35 pressures, 3 sacks, you know, he took 9 penalties. He's not, you know, in that elite status. He's maybe like a high level tier 3 left tackle in this league. You know, he's flirting with being like a tier 2 tackle. I think, you know, as he gets more comfortable. The thing is, when you're a late round pick also, it's kind of, those are the guys who very rarely have this high ceiling of what they could be. You know, once you get into those day 3 picks, it's a lot of guys who are projects who you could break out at some point, but most likely are going to be guys that you could probably coach up to have like a high floor, low ceiling. And I feel like that's what they've been able to achieve here with Rasheed Walker, where he falls into this weird category of he's completely replaceable. It's just a matter of who you're going to replace him with. They drafted Jordan Morgan. This year they drafted Anthony Belton. It's like there's this constant okay, he needs to be replaced. But he just keeps beating out the replacements that you keep bringing in. You kind of go, okay, we're not going to just let him go, because are there guys that are available that are better than him? Not really. He's good. He's good. He doesn't jump off the page like Jordan Mailata, or he doesn't jump off the page, like Laramie Tunsil, or, whatever. So from just an excitement standpoint, like the quote unquote sexy pick, yeah, you know what? He's not Joe Alt. He's not Rashawn Slater. He's not Andrew Thomas, but man, he's there. 562 snaps, only gave up 3 sacks. He's not terrible. He's not terrible at all. In the run game, that may be a different story. He's not the greatest run blocker in the world. You bring in Aaron Banks, like I said earlier, because he's got that experience in this similar system coming over from San Francisco. So he slides right into that guard spot that you were trying to replace when John Runyon left and all that. And now Josh Myers is gone. It opened up that guard spot, because you figured we're going to sign the best interior lineman that we can get our hands on, whether it's a center or a guard. They got the guard. They kicked Jenkins into center now. And Elton Jenkins, a tremendous pass blocker. One of the best. He did all this stuff at guard, by the way, for the most part. A little bit at tackle as well. Took 10 penalties, but only gave up 1 sack, 16 pressures. So he averaged less than a pressure a game. That's damn good. Even for an interior offensive lineman, that's damn good. And he's suffered from the same thing that, I talked about this in the Patriots video, now 20 videos ago, almost at this point. It feels 10, 15 videos ago at this point. Because he's such an exceptional football player. He's just a really good offensive lineman, that he sort of hasn't had the opportunity to truly see the best of what he could be in the NFL. And what I mean by that is, Lane Johnson has played right tackle since the first day he showed up. He wasn't a guard. He wasn't left tackle. He was a right tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's what he is. That's what he's been. And look how great he's become. Elton Jenkins, every year it seems, he's starting at a new position. Now he comes in, he plays at this elite level at all these positions. And when he originally came into the league, there was talk of him being, I think he was a center his last year at Mississippi State or wherever it was he went to school. I'm pretty sure he was a center that last year, because I remember the talk of him coming into the league is that they were like, he's a center, maybe he can play guard, or it was vice versa or something like that, because he played both in college. So now he's sort of kicking back to that thing. Now, for a center, it does take the least significant pounding, I guess, on the body to some degree. Because in pass pro, you're executing a lot in double teams. So I think having him as your center being such a great pass protector does help the middle of the field, because I feel like he's going to be able to pick up all the right blitzes in the A-gap. He's going to make the right decisions when they run those stunts, those A-gap, B-gap stunts that you'll see defensive fronts run, especially the Minnesota Vikings, who are going to come with all this exotic stuff up front. He's the perfect guy to really have in there to help navigate that. Now, we talked about also the issues that Jordan Love was having pre-snap, playing against the blitz, playing against pressure. Having Elton Jenkins in there at center is going to help Jordan Love, because he's going to be able to make his own calls for the offensive line as well, you would anticipate. And you're putting probably the most high IQ, best football player that you have on that offensive line there at the center position, who's played all these different positions as well, who's going to be able to apply what is being shown in the front seven and even out into towards the secondary. He's going to be able to make decisions and calls to his fellow linemen based upon such a multitude of different perspectives that he's gathered as a professional football player around across the years. So there is a huge advantage to that from a mental aspect of the game and from that pre-snap aspect of the game that Elton Jenkins is going to be able to bring here. You would hope so. Where he's just going to suffer, though, is going to be in the run game. It's not just really anything that he particularly does great. He's definitely that pass protecting guy. Sean Rhyan comes in, gets another start here. I don't know that there's much competition for that starting guard spot. There was talk of Jordan Morgan kicking into guard here, and Sean Rhyan quickly beat him out before Jordan Morgan went right back to tackle. So that experiment kind of died a slow death over the summer. Or a quick death, that is. But then they drafted Anthony Belton, and Anthony Belton, I really liked him. I thought that, as a pass protector, he comes in pretty good. But he's not a guard, so, Sean Rhyan gets to sort of settle in here. This interior of the offensive line seems pretty safe to be able to develop some type of chemistry here amongst each other. Incorporating Aaron Banks and sort of the new setup they got here on the interior. And it helps that they are bookended by a pretty solid left tackle in Rasheed Walker and one of the best right tackles in the league in Zach Tom. Zach Tom sort of came into the league the same way that Elton Jenkins came in, except he's been able to completely settle at one position, and look at what's happened with him settling at this one position already. From a pass pro perspective, he gave up 3 sacks on 24 pressures. He's not this great pass protector by any means. Took 7 penalties. But he's good starting caliber. Getting better at it every year. But where he really excelled was as a run blocker. And he was as good as a run blocker as the best run blockers in the entire league on that right tackle spot. An A+ zone grade, and they run that over half the time. Even from when they were running gap, which because you have a guy like Josh Jacobs, you want to sort of work that in there as well. It really helps with his skill set and his body type and his physicality. He did that at, a B-. Like a good, very good. Elite zone grade, and then a good gap grade, which when you run it at the percentage levels that they're running it at, this is exactly the kind of balance that you want in terms of the quality that he's giving you. So just a star in the making. Some would argue already a star. I think his size kind of was working against him when he first came in. People were worried about that. And I think he's worked around it really well. They've schemed him up to work around it really well. And I think just from... You watch him play, and he's got really great feet. His use of his hands are really good. And even in pass pro, he uses the late hand technique of Lane Johnson, pretty well. Run blocking, he's so quick off the snap. He's so quick getting to his mark. So quick to getting into the right position against the defender and getting off a double team and up to the second level when he needs to in that zone. So he's executing it at such a well level, using that athleticism completely to his advantage. And the entire offensive line really benefits from that. And I think as they still got some sneaky young players, though, on this offensive line. Like Sean Rhyan and Zach Tom and Rasheed Walker. They aren't like these hard super veterans of the league by any means. Sean Ryan's sure got some years to him. Rasheed Walker's had a couple years. Zach Tom, I think this is year 3 for him. But they got some room to grow still. And I think that as they get more comfortable and they get these really good players behind them, they're going to be able to grow really well. I just wonder how they're going to balance out this pass pro. Because, other than Elton Jenkins, they just have good pass protectors. How is Sean Rhyan going to do working on an island more often than not? Because, between him and Aaron Banks is just a worse pass blocker. So you anticipate Elton Jenkins doing a little bit more work on that left side with the double teams and all that, especially because it's the blind side and everything. So you expect there to be stunts and blitzing and whatnot come more often from that side of the line as well. So how is Sean Rhyan going to operate on those islands by himself? And how are you going to use, extra protection from a tight end or a running back to help out on either side of the ball also? Like that's going to be the week-to-week scheme issue with the offensive line. But I mean, when they're still going to be a top 3 pass blocking offensive line for me. because I do think that Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker are going to be able to hold their own most of the time. They should. When you get Aiden Hutchinson and guys like that, nobody does well against them. But they're more than good enough to go one-on-one for a majority of the game against most teams' top edge rusher and probably come out on top more often than not. I think the same goes for the interior. I think Elton Jenkins being there, he's going to make sure everyone's in the right spot. He's going to make the right shifts. He's going to make the right rotations and all that. Identify the stunts, communicate well. So I have no reservations about this offensive line. It's very much a top 10, borderline top 7 offensive line overall that still has room to grow, and that's a rare thing for offensive lines and position group even that is already ranked this high to still have so much potential for growth. And I think that's something that Packers fans should be really excited about. And I think from an offensive production standpoint, it really does wonders for raising up the expectations as well. So it is my 5th offense, with the 11th coordinator, 10th pass offense, 7th ranked rush offense. So it's just an offense that you're going to be able to count on week in and week out to produce. You just wonder, can Jordan Love get this group to a level where they're the best? Moving on to the defense, and we're going to start here with the defensive line. Really the only star is Rashawn Gary. They're 21st in pass rush, 26th in rush defense. You're waiting for somebody else. And this is why it's okay, I get why you're going for Micah Parsons here as long as you can keep Rashawn Gary. Because if you don't keep Rashawn Gary in a Micah Parsons trade, then you're kind of at square one here, because Rashawn Gary's still a really good player. From a pass rush perspective, he gets an 89 grade. He only took 635 snaps last year, so his health can be a bit of a red flag coming up. He's had a couple seasons here where he's picked up a couple boo-boos. But I just, for a guy his size, he converts speed to power really well. He's got really good swim move, really good spin when he wants to use it. The bull rush is pretty good as well. 47 pressures on, to get 8 sacks. So 43rd in pass rush win percentage, which isn't that high. But man, he's working off of double teams almost all the time. He's basically, the way that teams have just disrespected the Packers pass rush the last couple seasons, he's pretty much been like a glorified nose tackle out there in pass rushing circumstances, because he's just working double teams the whole game. So what do you really expect from him? I think that's an issue, and that's why I think they need to retain him if they do acquire Micah Parsons, which I keep checking even as I'm recording this to make sure they haven't. But even then, from a run defense perspective, he was 3rd in stops amongst edge players last year. So he brings a really incredibly balanced game. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles. There's something missing from him in this elite level performance. But he just executes, man. He's always in the right spot. He's more often than not getting off his block. If you single up on him, he's going to really do some damage to you. I will say that. And if he gets his hands on you, you're most likely coming down. You just want him to have a little bit more stamina out there to work. You want him to have a little bit more care for his health week to week. And you need to be able to manage his workload a little bit here, while also not completely losing the overall integrity of your entire defensive front, because after him, there's not a whole lot. Talk about the rest of the edge room here. Kingsley Enagbare is going to be somebody who comes in. He's mostly going to work those early downs because Lucas Van Ness has been so terrible in the run defense. But he's a really solid run defender, Kingsley Enagbare. Not a great pass rusher. Lucas Van Ness does have him on that, but Lucas Van Ness doesn't really have a whole lot that he's offering right now from a full-time starter perspective. So you're going to see Kingsley Enagbare probably be the starter more often than not from week to week, while Van Ness sort of works out what else he has other than just being a situational pass rusher from time to time. And he's going to have some competition out there too. You know, Brenton Cox can give you a sneaky good performance from time to time. Aaron Mosby on early downs at least. In run defense will beat out Van Ness as it stands right now. And then you got Baron Sorrell, you know, the rookie who's coming in. I wonder, you know, you see these rookies who come in, you know, day 3, who will sneak up on you. Kingsley Nagbari did it. You know, can Baron Sorrell sort of sneak up on Van Ness here? I don't. It's Jeff Hafley's task here to get this kid up to speed. Because 3rd year, 1st round pick, top 15 pick in the draft. This needs to get going. They've had some success though on the interior of the defensive line. They got a really decent rotation here. It's led by Kenny Clark, who's still a solid player by all means, you know, as a nose tackle. Got you a sack last year, 33 pressures. He was 40th in win percentage, which, not great. But he is your nose tackle, and he's had in the past some really great performances. At one point, he was the best, arguably, nose tackle in the entire league. He was definitely up there, and then, you know, injuries and age and all that, he's sort of fallen off a little bit here. But he's still starting caliber. It still brings you a really balanced game. It's just, you know, the high level is just sort of lacking here from Kenny Clark at this stage in his career. You know, but still, you know, under 10% missed tackle rate. You know, he gets those paws on you, it's over. Which is just a positive thing that I think a lot of these guys on this defensive line have is, you know, they really do a good job of cleaning up their tackles. You know, they don't let guys just run through them and allow a lot of broken tackles in the run game. Devontae Wyatt, you know, last year settled into being what they were hoping he was going to be when they drafted him in the 1st round, which was a solid starting defensive tackle with really good pass rush. And he had a really good pass rush last year. He comes in, he's the 2nd best pass rusher on the team. You know, so him and Gary are a good complement for each other from the edge to the interior. You just want something. You just want a little bit more there because, you know, Devontae Wyatt is really good, but he's not this like upper tier yet. You know, he's in that category with defensive tackles the same way Jaden Reed's in the categories with receivers. You know, like good, but you know, it'd be nice if you had somebody better, or if he got much better. You know, you got Carl Brooks, you got Colby Wooden, who are really good rotational pieces. I like having them as sort of part of this group as well. I think that really keeps everyone fresh. And I think that they both have enough ability in both aspects of the game, you know, run defense and pass rush, that they can be really serviceable, you know, substitutes throughout a game. They'll keep this defensive line from an interior standpoint really pushing forward. The real concern is just this edge room. Like, who's coming out the other end as the star opposite Rashawn Gary? It just doesn't seem like that guy exists as it currently stands. And how many assets do you need to give up to improve that by bringing in Micah Parsons? Like, it's all very convoluted and up in the air. So you're just kind of like wanting to build from the inside the way that you're sort of used to doing as an organization, that they just haven't done with this edge room in particular since getting Rashawn Gary. Now we're here with the linebackers, and they're as smack dab in the middle of a linebacking pairing as there is in the league. They got their solid, true 3-down Mike linebacker in Edgerrin Cooper, coming in now to his 2nd year. Hoping he can develop further, but man, what a great rookie campaign he had. He was 4th in stops percentage amongst linebackers. Just a phenomenal coverage there. Great in those short yardage running situations. He was pretty decent in pass coverage as well. I thought that, you know, allowing a less than a 94 passer rating, only allowed 1 touchdown. 328 yards allowed. He kept everything in front of him really well. He blitzed kind of well as also. I just was really impressed. You know, the only thing that was really holding him back and why his run defense grade is only down to an 83 is because he was pushing almost a 16% missed tackle rate. which that needs to be cleaned up. You're a linebacker, man. Tackling is what you should be doing. Tackling should be your number one priority here. And when it's that bad, it does take away from what he could be. If he gets that missed tackle rate, though, that percentage under 10% this upcoming season, then he's like going to be pushing that like high 80s in run defense as well grade, and really establishing himself as a great two-way linebacker. And there's, this is like the crown jewel of what you can acquire in this league is a two-way linebacker. You get them in Fred Warner, you have it in Roquan Smith, and you want to be able to have this here in Aaron Cooper, who can be that quarterback out there on the field, who you don't have to worry about, whether the team's running it or running it or passing it. He can keep up with the tight ends. He can get out there, with some athleticism on the running backs when in man coverage. He can be sticky enough against the tight ends. He works the zone really well. And he picks the right gap almost every single time in run defense. It's just, the damn missed tackles. The damn missed tackles. He's got to clean that crap up. And speaking of having to clean up, who's the number 2? Right now they'll tell you it's Quay Walker, who, to me, he's always the guy crying in the tunnel. Sulking like a child in the tunnel. Just embarrassing. And it deserves to stay with him. I think. But from a talent perspective, him and Isaiah McDuffie are pretty much the exact same. I just think Quay Walker, pass coverage, slash, pass defense, does get the edge because I think he's a quality blitzer. Now, I do wonder if maybe do you convert Quay Walker to more of an edge player this season? I don't know. It depends on how suffering the edge room is, but if you're going to start Isaiah McDuffie in like a traditional 3-4 defense with Aaron Cooper, then having Quay Walker and Rashawn Gary sort of be your defensive ends or 3-4 outside linebackers in that case, I'm not completely opposed to that. I just think that Quay Walker I haven't seen anything that shows that he's more mature. I know Packer fans will maybe argue it, like, oh, he was just young, and where's the development? Where's the showing that he's better than that, or his development could be better than that? I just don't see it in Quay Walker. He was overdrafted. He's been overhyped. He's been overplayed. And when you're pretty much producing at the same level as the guy they got, I think, in the 6th round of what maybe the same draft. I don't know. I kind of like Isaiah McDuffie to play more. But, you want that blitzing aspect, so that's where Quay Walker does come in. And if the front four, if your defensive line isn't going to execute at a high level, then, yeah, you kind of need Quay Walker out there for his athleticism and for his blitzing ability. So it's a double-edged sword with what they got going on in front of these guys as to why Quay Walker probably does end up getting the most playing time out of the 2 linebackers truly competing for starting reps, him and McDuffie. Now, even without Jair Alexander, this is still a good group. They're 12th for me in pass coverage. They were much higher when they had Jair Alexander, I will say. But like I said, sort of when talking about the coaches, now you got guys who are sort of being thrust into positions that maybe they shouldn't necessarily be in at this point. Specifically Carrington Valentine, who is probably going to be one of the top corners on this team, probably starting outside corner here. Only got about 520 something snaps last year, but played really well in them. Less than an 80% passer rating, only took 2 penalties, didn't give up any touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3 pass breakups. He gets a B- in man and a B in zone. He was good. He was good, but now he's coming in, he's expected to be the number 1 corner on the team? And now you're shifting guys all over the place. You're moving guys into outside corner spot. I just don't know that it's fair for Carrington Valentine to be in this situation. And maybe grading him at this point, knowing he's probably going to end up being a number 1 guy, it may be a little unfair. But he's got some competition here. And we've seen the competition be Nate Hobbs and Keyshawn Nixon, who are currently listed as the 2 outside corners here. And I don't get having Nate Hobbs do that at all. Nate Hobbs is a slot. Did some outside work with the Raiders, sure, but he is a slot. And if you're going to have him out there playing outside corner as a majority of the time, you're asking for trouble here. I know you want Javon Bullard to come up and be that nickel back and be, the slot corner and everything. But I don't know. And then the fact that Keyshawn Nixon is your other starting outside corner, I don't see that lasting. That's going to end up being Carrington Valentine, to be honest. I think by the time we get to week 1, that'll be pretty much decided. But man, Keyshawn Nixon looked real good as cornerback 4 on this team. Carrington Valentine looked real good as cornerback 2 on this team. Now, who's not having that alpha in the room, it does change what you're going to do on the defensive side of the ball, because you used to be able to just have, when Jair Alexander was healthy and actually able to play, which I know Packer fans are like, hasn't been all that often lately. Fair. But you did have that when he was on the field to be like, you know what? His side of the field is good. It is locked down. Don't need to worry about it. We can scheme everything up to sort of favor the other side and help out all these other guys and make them all better. Now you don't really have that. Now you're seeing out there got to play a really balanced game, and now you're going to be focused a lot more on matchups and all that, and what kind of receivers does this group have? Is this going to be the time where Javon Bullard plays in the slot when you're playing against Minnesota and Detroit, when that's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson? Probably not, right? Or even Adam Thielen, who could possibly end up in Minnesota by the time this video comes out. You do wonder what the outsides is going to look like in these games and how they're going to create these matchups. And is it going to be a sort of situation where it's like you just play on the right side, you just play on the left side no matter what, and learn how to play that, learn it perfectly, and execute to the best of your ability, and it'll hopefully raise our floor high enough where we won't be completely giving away games because we just get game beat on the outside. There's a real world where this cornerback group just completely ends up falling apart. And Carrington Valentine, with all the extra playing time, does not live up to what he did last year. And that Nate Hobbs does play too much on the outside, and that does hurt his ability. That Keyshawn Nixon, who gets thrust into the starting lineup here, just doesn't handle it, doesn't have the skills to handle it. One thing you don't need to worry about, though, is what they got going at the safety position. Now, I like Javon Bullard being like this sort of hybrid guy that they have. They got Evan Williams, who, surprised, I think, a lot of people with how well he played last year. Even from a depth perspective, you got Zane Anderson and Kitano Ladapo. They might have the best overall safety room in the entire league by when all is said and done from a coverage perspective. They don't really have it from a run support perspective in this group at all. They're 27th in DB run support. But when you have a guy like Xavier McKinney on the back end who he can be a box safety for you. He can be that floating middle of the field free safety. Go out there and never get beat for a touchdown. Have 8 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, and a 56.4 passer rating when targeted. What else could you want? 62 tackles, 21 tackle assists. He's coming downhill aggressively. Even for a guy his size, he's just another guy who was a really great player his last year with the Giants. The contract really didn't kind of work out, and the contract negotiations didn't work out in his favor. It comes here to Green Bay and just excels. And just builds on what he did his final year in New York, which is establish himself as one of the best safeties in the entire league. It did take him a while because I think his size worked against him for a little bit. And I think trying to figure out, how much do you replicate what he did at Alabama, and how much do you just bring him up to speed with a more simplified role at the pro level? What was it going to be? And I think that they found it in just making him a majority free safety, and 25-30% of the time he's working in the box, where he can sort of hide behind guys and everything. Use that size to his advantage. He gets in there, he's sort of hiding behind linebackers and everything. You'll see him when he comes up and plays in the box. He's like, he understands that he's not this big guy, so you'll see him sort of creep behind a linebacker sometimes. And might be standing straight up. A guy like Quay Walker who's got some length to him. Sneak up in there and almost play it off like aloof, like, oh, I'm not going up here. And then he's right there and he's blowing up plays that you're trying to get your tight end involved or your slot guy, on a quick little drag or a whip route. Xavier McKinney's boom there, breaks it up. Brings the guy down, tackles him, intercepts the ball. Just a really great safety, and I miss him. I miss him on my Giants, but it's a group that should be good, even with the loss of Alexander. And some of the other losses that they had, losing Ballantyne and Corey Ballantyne and Eric Stokes even and all that. I don't know that the addition of Nate Hobbs is truly significant if you're going to just use him as an outside corner. But I don't know that I'm all that comfortable with Nate Hobbs not being an outside corner and Keyshawn Nixon being a starter. So that does need to get worked out here. I wonder if there isn't somebody. I mean, Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there, isn't he? I feel like Asante Samuel Jr. is still a free agent. I don't remember hearing him sign with anyone. Why isn't he here? That would be a fantastic signing. That would put you right back on schedule here, get you maybe into the top 10 in coverage and up your little run support thing a bit here. Make things a little bit much more comfortable, much more. Because then you can run Hobbs as your nickel a majority of the time, and then Bullard comes in like dime packages. Look at me, I'm just GMing it right now on the spot here, just thinking about there has to be somebody out there, and I feel like Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there. I need you guys to correct me if I'm wrong, but as of this recording, it's August 23rd. I don't know. Whatever. It's still a good group. I like what they got on the back end. I don't think they're going to be a team that gets beat all that much deep. I'm worried about this group because of the lack of top talent in the cornerback room, them kind of getting nickel and dimed, in the short to intermediate areas all game because they can't get the pass rush going all that much, and guys get separation relatively quickly on the outside. So that really is, I feel, the only concern for the secondary group in terms of the pass defense. But overall, it is my 26th ranked defense, 21st in pass defense, 27th in run defense. It's a group that needs to come together here. They got very significant spots, but very obvious spots where if they improve, it will raise this group up significantly. So there's at least a pathway that's clearly drawn out for this defense to get them to up their game to another level, to up them into another tier or two by the end of this season. Checking out their schedule here, they had the 6th hardest schedule coming in, a .557. But the Vegas prediction was looking like only 9.5 wins from what I was gathering. So, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got 8 wins for this team pretty much lined out here. So there's no reason why they can't find 2 more in the remaining bit of their schedule here. Now, I look at what they did draw, getting Cleveland and Dallas on the road kind of is a bummer, but you get Cincinnati at home, you get Carolina at home. You play Chicago twice. I still think you're significantly better than Chicago at this point. With Minnesota, I think you're good enough where that home game looks real good. With Detroit, it's kind of a push both ways. You got a real good draw here getting Washington and Philly at home, who are 2 really good teams, but getting to play them at home is significant. Got kind of the crap end of the stick getting Denver on the road. You game Baltimore at home is really good as well. That's a really good draw for them. Unfortunately, you get Arizona and Pittsburgh on the road. If those were home games, I would be much more inclined to just call those wins. But you're going to Pittsburgh and playing the Aaron Rodgers Bowl and all that, and going to Arizona and playing on that fast track against Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride, how you match up against them from the defense's perspective, I think could be a real issue. But I still am going with the over. I'm pretty confident that 10 to 11 wins is still in the future of this team, despite how hard their schedule is, because I think that there's enough teams here where they got enough wins on this schedule, and there's enough push games here. There's no game here that I'm looking at and going, they're for sure losing this game. I think that for all the things that we just talked about, certain things line up perfectly, then this should be an easy over if everything lines up perfectly. They are overall my 6th ranked team. They are 7th with the head coach, 5th with the offense, but then 26th with the defense. Again, clear path to improvement, though, on the defensive side of the ball if they just play their cards right and things work out. And there it is, my number 6 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Green Bay Packers. Thank you for coming. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. If you're watching on your mobile and you have the option, slide the comment section over. Hit the hype button. Hype this video button. The beta testing is out there. Shout out to YouTube. I was able to do it on like my last video. So maybe it'll work on these ones. Maybe it won't. But if it's there, please click it. And I'll see you guys with the next video next time. See ya.